Okay, well, I'll tell you a little bit about it. Joy is a nonprofit organization dedicated to music education, and I wanted to start it to help, uh, if needed, to start an essentially Ellington regional festival in Las Vegas. And I don't know where to start with this, Sheldon. Um, well, one of the things that we do, as a member of Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra, is essentially Ellington competition every year, which is a high school competition for the top 15 bands, high school bands in the country, come and play in New York. And Mom always comes to it. And a few years ago, Mom asked me, why aren't there any bands from Vegas here? And I reached out to a couple band directors and tried to get them involved, and nothing really changed or happened. And we decided to try and make a little bit of a push and see if we can get some bands involved. So when I came through Vegas last, when was that, Shell? September, I think it was, with Winton and Lincoln Center Band. I did a Q&A, and I invited all the high schools. I knew all the high school band directors and their students to come to our sound check. And I did a Q&A with them, and I was so impressed just with the attitude of the kids. They were very respectful. They had very thoughtful questions. They were dressed nice. And there were a lot of them. There were, I think, 250 kids at the sound check. I did a Q&A with them, and they really inspired me to want to do something for them and to want to do something for the community that I grew up in. Growing up in Las Vegas, I had an amazing education that you can't get anywhere else. That, because of Dad and the work that he did, playing on the Strip and playing with all the great musicians he played with, I got exposed to a lot of great music from a very early age. And I had great teachers, great instructors, from Tommy Prello to Walt Blanton, Hap Smith. From the time I really started playing, I had great instruction and great teachers who were all world-class players. And I want to do something at this stage of my life to try and pay that forward, and to pay it forward to the community that gave that to me when I was a kid. And so now I'm on the other side of that coin. I'm no longer that kid. Now I'm a professional musician playing and touring with the greatest musicians in the world. And so now I'm that guy who can inspire younger players. And I want to do that. I want to give back to the community I grew up in. And so it's gone beyond just Mom asking me why there aren't bands from Vegas here in New York at essentially Ellington, to me really wanting to inspire kids to grow to become musicians and follow the path that I have followed. And whatever little bit I can do to try and inspire kids is what it's all about. So through Mom asking me that simple question, I decided to try and reach out to the community in Las Vegas, to the high school band directors and the kids, and try and get them excited about playing this music, jazz music. And so when I did that Q&A, they really inspired me, and they made me start thinking, how can I really do something to inspire them? And so I made a push. I reached out to all the band directors that I could. I told them about the Essentially Ellington program in Las Vegas, or in New York, that we do at Jazz Lincoln Center. And it's free to sign up online. When a band signs up or a band director signs up, they have access to all kinds of instructional videos. They have access to over 120 Duke Ellington compositions and arrangements for free for their bands to play. And it's all totally free. So, I reached out, and a bunch of bands signed up. A couple months later, I contacted the head of education at Jazz Lincoln Center and asked, if any bands from Las Vegas or Nevada had signed up, and he checked. And it turned out that there was a big surge, and all of a sudden we had 18 high school bands, high school and junior high school bands that had signed up for Essentially Ellington in not only Las Vegas, but throughout Nevada. And I said, well, that's great. Maybe one of these bands will be really good and we'll make it to the finals and come to New York and, compete here in New York for Essentially Ellington. And he said, no, you don't understand. You've got more than enough bands signed up where you can actually set up an Essentially Ellington regional festival in Las Vegas. And so I reached out to Dave Loeb, the director of jazz studies at UNLV. I called him up and he said, I can't talk. I'm about to get on a plane to New York. And I said, well, I'm in New York. What time does your flight get in? And he told me like 5 o'clock or 5:30. So I said, all right, well, I'm playing tonight at Lincoln Center with Wynton. Do you want to come and bring your wife? And he said, yeah. I said, cool, I got some things I want to talk to you about, so let's plan on meeting up and having some food or drink or whatever after the show. So Dave Loeb and his wife came to town. He was coming to town to play with Ben Vereen. And we all got together after the concert and had a little bite to eat. And we talked about the idea of setting up an Essentially Ellington regional festival in Las Vegas. And then and there, Dave Loeb committed to me to have UNLV sponsor it, to host it. Not sponsor, but to host it at UNLV. And he said, the first step that we can make in setting this up is I can have you, he said, as a guest soloist with UNLV Jazz Ensemble. And we can do it in February, which is Black History Month, and we can play the music of Duke Ellington in celebration of Black history. And also as a way of planting the seed for setting up in the future, a year later, basically, the Essentially Ellington Regional Festival in Las Vegas, the first annual. So that's what we did, and we also invited and gave free tickets away for that concert, where I was a featured soloist with UNLV Jazz Ensemble, to all the high school kids who wanted to come. So Dave Loeb offered up as many tickets as the high schools wanted so the kids could attend the concert. During that week, while I was in Vegas, I did outreach. I went to 10 different schools. I think it was 9 or 10 different schools, and I did workshops with all the schools, jazz bands, and talked to them about trying to set up, we're trying to set up the Essentially Ellington Festival and to get them playing that music, and gave them free coaching on the music and worked with them. And it was a real inspiring week for me. It was a lot of work, but it was really inspiring to see all these kids so eager to play the music. Now, with all that, I was thinking the whole time, as things were developing and ideas were being thrown back and forth between me and Dave Loeb and Gary Cordell and Mom and everybody else, Steve and Heather, I decided to start a nonprofit organization just to have in place in case we needed something to help set up and organize and channel funds through to be able to do an Essentially Ellington festival in Las Vegas. And then the more we talked about it, the more we started to see what, more ideas, more things that we can do with an organization, nonprofit organization. So we formed an organization where I'm the president of it. Gary Cordell's vice president. Mom is a secretary. Debbie is the treasurer. Steve and Heather are on board. You were on board. Donnie Thompson, who's a friend of mine from high school, is on board. And we're having more ideas of more projects to do beyond just doing Essentially Ellington and having that as, that's what started it all. But now we're looking at also helping Nevada School of the Arts to implement a jazz program. The executive director for Nevada School of the Arts is Shake Gukasian. And Shake approached me when I posted on Facebook, about the Jazz Outreach Initiative, or Joy. Um, she reached out to me and said she would love to involve me in Nevada School of the Arts, and asked me if I would help her to implement a jazz program at Nevada School of the Arts. So we're doing that as well. So that's another thing that we're doing through Joy. So we're working on essentially Ellington Regional Festival, working on Nevada School of the Arts jazz program, and we're also discussing having some sort of a lecture series. We can do things like bring in musicians like myself who came up through the system in Las Vegas, either through high school or college. Myself, there's Ben Stivers, who's toured with all kinds of people from Chris Bodie to the Bee Gees, and Mike Cain, who's a great jazz pianist who came up through Las Vegas, went to high school, or grew up in Vegas, went to junior high school, and he's toured with Jack DeJohnette. He's now teaching in a university. He was teaching at Eastman. Now he's teaching in a university up in Canada. Rachel Eckroth is somebody that I want to reach out to, who's a great piano player who's currently touring with Chris Bodie. Cleto Escobedo is another guy. He's the band leader on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. And I've known Cleto since high school. He went to Clark High School. We went to UNLV together. So we're looking to start either some sort of a lecture series to bring artists like that into Vegas to work with kids, and talk to them and share with them their experiences, through music. But musicians who are making a living on the road, and talk to kids about what it means to be a musician, and how music is a way that we can reach people and that we can touch people and use as a tool for enlightenment and for healing and for making a positive difference in the world and to changing things. Because music is something that touches people in the deepest, most profound of ways without people even realizing. It's music. And you can change somebody's vibration. You can change their mood from being upset to being happy just through playing music. And to me, it's more than just playing music. It's a mission. It's a purpose. It's a soul purpose. And it's important for me to share that and to try to inspire kids with that kind of a mission. So that's essentially what we want to try and do with Joy, is to reach kids, inspire them, get them to study music, and understand that through the discipline of learning a musical instrument, they ultimately learn about themselves. And it's just like any other profound discipline, be it exercising or Tai Chi or yoga or meditation. It ultimately not only teaches you how to play a musical instrument, but it teaches you about yourself and how to become a better person and make a positive difference in the world. So that's what I want to try and do through Joy, is reach kids and get them to explore music and grow as people through that. Is that enough? hmm Okay, well, growing up, I mean, I had such a unique, great music education, largely because of our dad. Because I remember from the time I was a little kid, before I even played anything, going to rehearsals, and I remember sleeping under the timpani when Dad was playing with Bob Barclay's orchestra or the Las Vegas Symphony, and I remember just being exposed to music, loving being around music and musicians. I remember going, when I got older and I started playing piano when I was a little kid, going to rehearsals with Johnny Haig's orchestra, where Dad was playing, and getting to sit behind the piano player, sit behind Ronnie Simone as he played, and watch the chords go by and look at his fingers and see how he played the piano, and then later when I started playing trumpet, I used to go and sit behind the trumpet section and sit behind master trumpet players like Rick Baptist and Lynn Nicholson and all these incredible trumpet players, and I would just sit back behind the trumpet section and watch them play, watch them breathe, watch how they approach playing music. And these are masters of the art of playing the trumpet. And here I was, a 12-year-old kid, just starting out, and I was exposed to some of the greatest trumpet players of all time because of Dad. He would take me to rehearsals, and he saw that I was interested. It was unbelievable, the education that I got through that experience of just getting to go to rehearsals with Dad. I remember when I was going to, before I went to sixth grade, which was when you chose what instrument you were going to play, I'd already, learned a little bit of drums from Dad, and a little bit of piano from Mom. And I went to a rehearsal with Dad because going into sixth grade, you can start playing a horn. That's when that started. The education in schools in Las Vegas was sixth grade, 11 years old. And I went to a rehearsal, and I tried. Dad had me try Charlie McLean's alto sax, and I tried Carl Fontana's trombone, and I tried Rick Baptist's trumpet. And Rick told Dad that I was a natural on the trumpet, that I should play trumpet. And so that's what I ended up playing. Now, Rick Baptist, since, he was playing in Vegas at the time, but he moved to LA and became the first call lead trumpet player in Los Angeles, and did over 1,000 movie dates and all the cartoons on TV. All the movies coming out of LA. That's Rick Baptist on lead trumpet. Now, the first trumpet I ever played was Rick Baptist's trumpet, and he's the one who told Dad that I should play the trumpet. I actually wanted to play sax because Dale said saxophone players got all the girls, but Dad got me a trumpet instead. That's a tough question. Um, I'll share a little story about when I decided that I wanted to play jazz. Because through high school, I played classical and jazz. I played in like the all-state orchestras and the Civic Symphony and things like that in Las Vegas. And I was studying with Walt Blanton. And I loved jazz. And Walt turned me on to a lot of great jazz players. He turned me on to Miles Davis and um, Freddie Hubbard and Don Cherry and Kenny Wheeler and Jack Walrath. And he always encouraged me to play jazz. But we studied mostly classical in the beginning. And then one day I went into a lesson and told Walt I didn't want to play classical music. Just said, I said something real stupid, like Mozart gives me a headache or something like that. And after Walt was done basically yelling at me and telling me I was full of it, he said, "Okay, so you want to play jazz?" I said, "Yeah." And so he sat me down and gave me a heart-to-heart about it. And he said, "Okay, well, you got to realize jazz music is an art form. It's not about showing up to a jazz band and, wearing a silly hat and some sunglasses and thinking you're cool," which is kind of what we were doing. He said, "No, it's an art form that if you really want to play jazz, you dedicate your life to it. And if you dedicate your life to the art form and do it for the sake of the art will take care of you." He said, "But don't expect to ever make any money. Don't expect to ever own a home. And don't expect to make a good living. You might struggle, but if you are in it for the right reason, for the sake of the art will take care of you." And I took that to heart. And so I followed that path. I moved to New York. I used Berklee School of Music in Boston as a stepping stone. I applied to Boston to Berklee. I got a scholarship and was able to go to Berklee, and then just followed my path to New York. And I moved to New York, and I was broke. I had to work as a temp in a bank, but I was playing music and I was playing jam sessions and I had the time of my life. I don't regret a second of it. I was broke for a lot of years, but the deeper I got into the music and the more I got into um, playing the music for the sake of the music as opposed to trying to become a star or whatever, the more opportunities came my way, the more doors started open for me. Um, and I don't regret a second of it for myself. Everybody's got to figure that out for themselves, though. Um, there were a lot of years I spent being very broke, not having any money, and I did whatever I needed to do to get by. I worked a day job, or I did gigs playing weddings or playing salsa gigs till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning in the Bronx, or whatever I needed to do to make ends meet. But I did it, and I don't regret it for a second, because during the day we would be playing jam sessions in Brooklyn, at my apartment or a friend's apartment. We'd be writing new music for each other, challenging each other, growing as artists. And I was playing at the time, in people's apartments with people like Jeff Keezer and Josh Redman, Antonio Hart, so many great players who are really leading figures in the music scene today. Christian McBride. Christian and I were roommates, and now Chris is one of the leading figures in jazz today. And so many of us who were playing together at those times, we were broke, but we were loving what we were doing for the right reasons, for the sake of the music. So, like anything else, you can be a success or a failure. What does that mean? Does it mean making money, or does it mean doing something where you feel you're making a difference in the world? To me, it's the latter. And if you need to make money in order to make more of a difference in the world, that's what will happen. That's what will be provided to you to be able to make more of a difference, as long as the intention behind what you do is coming from that place. Hmm. Okay. When I first joined Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra, I really had very little experience in working with kids, or doing any kind of educational outreach. Um, a big part of what we do at Jazz Lincoln Center is just that. It's education. I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but the majority of what we do at Jazz Lincoln Center and what the Jazz Lincoln Center does is all about that, all about education. And so when I joined the band, um, I was asked to join in on that. When we go on the road, we do outreach. I did 2 master classes today. I did one yesterday. I'm in North Carolina right now. Um, when I first joined the orchestra, I was very uncomfortable with it, and I asked them to team me up with somebody because I was shy speaking in front of people. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I knew the music. I knew how to play it, and I knew about it, and but I just didn't know how to verbalize that. And so I specifically asked to be teamed up with Victor Goines, who was the head of Juilliard Jazz Program. He's now the head of Northwestern Jazz Program. And he's a master educator and a great guy and a great friend. And so I asked them to team me up with Victor for my first few master classes or workshops that I did. So they did that. So I worked with Victor and I followed his lead and I listened to what he said and learned a lot. And the first time I did it alone was in Cuba. I did a master class for, it was over 100 trumpet students at a music school in Havana. And I was super nervous. I'd written a bunch of notes, things I wanted to talk about. I brought charts for the kids to play, for like 4 or 5 part trumpet section stuff to get them playing. Um, I had all kinds of copies of exercises that I wanted to share with them, and we were sitting having a cup of coffee before it was time to go in, and Ted Nash was there, who was another master educator, and Ted could see how nervous I was, and he said, "Man, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just nervous. I've never done this before on my own." And Ted gave me a great bit of advice. He said, "All right, just relax, take a deep breath." He said, "Before you start doing anything, when they introduce you, you go up to the front of the room." He said, "Just ask the kids, say, before we start, do any of you have any questions for me?" And see what that leads to. And so I did that. I went in, I had all these notes in my back pocket, I had all this music, this stack of stuff I set on top of the piano, and they introduced me. The kids started clapping. And I went up and I did. I just asked the kids, before we get started, do you guys have any questions for me? And hands went up. So I started fielding questions. And before I knew it, 2 hours went by. I hadn't looked at one note that I'd written down. I hadn't pulled out any music. I'd had the kids come up and play for me music that they were playing. It just flowed in such a natural way. Um, I'll never forget it. It it just came so naturally just to ask them, and the kids really dictated where we went, and I answered questions, which led to more questions, which led to more answers, and then I asked them questions, and it was just a continuous flow. And one of the people who was in the education department of Jazz Lincoln Center was at that workshop. She's since left the organization, but her name was Susan John. And afterwards, she was the one who told me time's up, and it was 2 hours had gone by. I felt like 5 minutes. And I told her, I said, "Man, that went by so quick. I was so nervous." And she said, "Man, you're such a natural at this. And I kind of am. It comes naturally to me to do this. And I've seen some guys go in with notes prepared and with a preconceived idea of what they want to work with the kids. I don't do that. I go in and go with the flow and work with the kids and check out the level where they're at. And I know enough to be able to coach kids in just about any situation, from beginner through professional, and be able to give them advice. Um, so that was my first experience in doing this on my own. And since then, I've just really gotten more and more into it, into working with kids and do this kind of outreach stuff that we do with Jazz at Lincoln Center. And um, for me, it's so important to do because I was one of those kids. I was one of them, and I see myself in those kids when I'm working with them. And looking back on myself when I was a kid, I think about all the stuff that mom and dad did for education. Mom fought the school district when they were trying to take music educators out of the elementary schools. Mom fought the school district on that and won, and was able to keep music education as part of the elementary schools. And Dad had that outreach thing that he did through what was that called? Young audiences, on a percussion that I remember he brought to my elementary school, and so I got to get out of class to help him set up. And it was such a big deal for me to see Dad in front of all my friends in elementary school playing with his group. So for me, at this stage, it's full circle, to my childhood. Seeing my mom and dad and what they did. So it has that much more importance to me personally to be involved with an organization like Jazz Lincoln Center, and be able to pay it forward, and be able to dedicate my time and much of my career to education through music, and to seeing how that makes a difference in people's lives, and to be that guy who inspires kids, because I was one of those kids who was inspired. So the what we do at Jazz Lincoln Center is, right along lines with what I feel is essentially my purpose in life, and to try and make a positive difference in the world. And so what I'm trying to do with Joy, or what I'm planning on doing with Joy, is an extension of that as well, the same thing. And it's all about making a difference. Well, that's a program. It's a good question. That's a program that's already established in New York with Jazz at Lincoln Center. Um, Ellington is he has the greatest body of work as a jazz composer of any other jazz composer in history. Duke Ellington has the largest, most diverse body of work. So, Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra was founded with many members of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So that's kind of the basis of Jazz at Lincoln Center. So they started this high school festival called Essentially Ellington, which started off over 20 years ago. And they've expanded, and Jazz Lincoln Center not only does it in New York, but they do regional festivals around the country, which I've been a part of. I worked on one in St. Louis, and they do regional festivals all around the country. So they already have the structure in place, and so to do it in Las Vegas, I've got Jazz and Lincoln Center behind me, and they're going to help to organize it and just put that structure in Las Vegas. And so it's kind of a no-brainer. It's I'm supported by Jazz at Lincoln Center and by Wynton Marsalis, and I have direct access to Wynton. I can call him anytime and ask him for advice. In fact, I spoke to him today about advice in setting up a jazz program for Nevada School of the Arts. So I have that kind of access to Wynton and to Jazz at Lincoln Center to help me in any endeavors that I have to move forward with joy. And that's a pretty powerful resource to have. Not only Wynton, but everybody in the orchestra. I was speaking with Victor Goins about it, who I mentioned, who was, now he's the head of the jazz department for Northwestern University. Vincent Gardner I spoke with about it, who Vincent is actually setting up and is about to start and launch a program that's going to be kind of a sister program to Jazz at Lincoln Center, but he's going to do it in Houston, in Texas. And Vincent's going to be heading that up and starting a professional orchestra and doing education. And so I was picking Vincent's brain about starting a jazz program at Nevada School of the Arts. And that's actually going to start up before the Essentially Ellington festival happens. But the planning is going into both of them at the same time. Another project that I'm thinking about and that I've spoken about is doing a Mingus project. And I've spoken to Sue Mingus, Charles Mingus's widow, who you know, about doing a Mingus festival in Las Vegas and getting the high school kids playing Charles Mingus's music. So there's all kinds of things that we're looking to do. But Ellington, doing Essentially Ellington made the most sense because it's a structure that's already tried and proven. It's already out there. And I got Jazz and Lincoln Center behind me 100% to set this up and help me organize the motherfucking nation. Shasta has a few like that. Yeah, I think it's cute. I think it's cute personally. Because jazz, uh, just by the nature of the music, deals with certain how can I put it? Through jazz is based in the blues and in swing, and jazz music is all about negotiation. It's all about working with other people. It's about communication more so than any other music. The harmony is much deeper in jazz than in any other form of music that is in existence. Um, that's a tough question to answer. Um, Other than to say the art form of jazz is just a much deeper art form. It takes a lot more skill, a lot more knowledge, and a lot more. Uh, how can I put it? That's a tricky question to put into words for me. Well, I don't know if it's a good place or not, but it's my hometown. You know, Las Vegas has always had kind of a underground jazz scene as well. There was always, when I was a kid, there were a lot of great musicians who had spent much of their lives touring with the big bands from the big band era, from Harry James' band to Tommy Dorsey's band to Count Basie's band, um, Fletcher Henderson's band. There was guys who settled in Vegas because there was steady work in Vegas, and they spent a lot of times playing jazz on the road. Um, with all those guys, or Buddy Rich, or Louis Bellson's bands, or Maynard Ferguson's bands. There's all kinds of great musicians in Vegas who didn't have an outlet in Vegas to be able to play jazz. They settled in Vegas because there was work, because of the showrooms. So there was a lot of work back then, and so all these great musicians came to town to settle down and work, but they didn't have an outlet. I remember, the only steady outlet I remember when I was a kid was a musicians union, where they had Kicks bands play. And the Kicks bands, you remember that show? You used to go hang out there, right? And it was all the musicians who either weren't working that night or they had a show and they would go after the show to play with the Kicks bands. And it would be like 3 or 4 different bands a night in different time slots playing jazz, playing big band jazz. And it was an outlet for them to get to play music that they loved, as opposed to playing the commercial stuff that they had to play, playing with Siegfried and Roy or whoever they were playing with on the strip. So there's always been, on some level, an underground scene for musicians playing jazz in Las Vegas. There was always like little clubs, um, you know, where guys could play. I remember Dad used to have jam sessions at the house when I was a little kid. I remember going out to the garage in the middle of the night, and there's Dad jamming with Carl Fontana and Tommy Turk, and um, you know, there's always been an underground jazz scene there. So, I think I'm sure it's still there, and I think if we um, tap into the resources that we have and the educators, the potential educators we have who are musicians on the scene, and give them an opportunity to play and to educate and to work with kids, I think it's going to grow the scene in Las Vegas and the audience in Las Vegas for jazz music. Um, but I think it's essential to start with the kids, because that's the future audience as well. You get the kids into the music, and then you're working towards a future. As opposed to like when I was a kid, guys just kind of played at whatever club after hours, and that's all it was. Or they played at the house, and play jam sessions and have fun, and that's what it was. Um, I think it's important to get the kids involved, get the kids playing the music, and then that's our future audience too. You know, because I mean, majority of the kids who get involved in the music in high school aren't going to become professional musicians. But what they will have learned from the music, you know, what you learn from jazz music goes so beyond just playing an instrument. You know, through jazz music, you learn empathy, you learn negotiation, you learn democracy, you learn how to work with people, you learn problem solving. More so with jazz music than any other music. So that kind of applies to your last question. But in Las Vegas, I think there's an underground scene amongst the musicians who are playing in town there, and I know there's untapped resources for educators who can work with kids. And I think the key is to work with these kids and get the kids playing the music and getting involved at a young age and getting excited about the music. And that's the future generation for audiences for this music. And I think it can grow into something great. But I I think it's really, really important to work with kids and get kids involved in it, um, for reasons. Plus, it's proven that kids who study music do well and do better in other areas in school as well. The areas of the brain that playing music touches on the same parts of the brain, that science and math and language all touch on, and it develops it through melody and through breathing and such natural things as a human being, natural experiences that we all have. But if you really touch on that with music, there have been studies that show that kids who study music consistently do better in all areas of learning. You know, and I think it's very important to stress that and to work with kids and get kids involved in the music. What was the question? Hmm. Well, what we're going to need help with, um, we're going to need financial help, obviously. That's the first thing that comes to mind because we have a lot of projects in mind that we want to be able to do, um, starting with essentially Ellington, and get these kids excited about playing Duke Ellington's music. And um, that costs money. We're going to, looks like we're going to be able to do it at UNLV. I'm not sure yet how much money it's going to cost, but we're going to need volunteers, which I think UNLV is going to, I think there are going to be a lot of UNLV students who are going to volunteer to help us. But, we're going to want to give workshops and do a lecture series and do a concert. We're talking about trying to do, like I mentioned, a festival, um, featuring the music of Charles Mingus. And so I would love to bring to Las Vegas the Mingus Big Band to perform at that festival for the kids and have the kids, you know, get as many high schools involved in playing Charles Mingus's music and have them compete and play and celebrate that music together. And, you know, all the guys at Jazz and Lincoln Center, I've spoken with each and every one of them, and I'd love to bring them out, at different times individually to be part of a lecture series, or to be but judges for the Essentially Ellington Festival, or a Mingus Festival, or be clinicians, or to be advisors in helping setting up a jazz program for Nevada School of the Arts, or any of these other projects. But in order to do that, we need money to be able to pay people. And Joy is a nonprofit organization, so we need donations in order to be able to pay for flights and hotels to bring people out and to pay them for their time. Because the people that I'm going to bring on board, for this project are all world-class musicians, absolute top of the field in today's music. And I've spoken to Wynton Marsalis about it, and Wynton said, "Let me know what you need." Wynton is on board. Um, I'm not sure how much, if he'd be willing to come out and do be part of a lecture series or be a guest soloist. That's very possible, But I'm looking to bring in people of that caliber to come in and be part of what we're trying to do, and what I keep saying, trying, what we're planning on doing at with Joy, and all that costs money. Winton would volunteer his time. He wouldn't charge money to come, I'm sure, but you got to pay for the travel, you got to pay for the hotel, and all that does cost money. So what I'm going to need, from outside sources really is donations in order to really make this happen and to help to fund these projects that I'm proposing and that we want to do as an organization. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you, Sheldon.